looks like we're going to try to go to Hawaii the end of May. Well, of course, we have our conference coming up in March.
Okay, good evening. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Camarillo Planning Commission on this day, Tuesday, February 1st, 2022. The Secretary can call the roll.
Commissioner Edsel.
Here.
Commissioner Murphy.
Here.
Commissioner Talmadge.
Here.
Vice Chair Vandermeulen.
Here.
And Chair Espinoza.
Here. If Commissioner Talmadge would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please rise. With the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Next item is the consent item on the agenda, which is just the minutes of our last meeting and reorganization meeting. If
I'll move approval of the consent calendar.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded for approval of the consent calendar. Any discussion? Go ahead, vote. Motion carries. Okay, now open up the public comment period. Now, this is the time for any member of the public that can come forward and address any matter that's not on tonight's agenda, which means that whatever it is they bring up to us during this period, we can't take any action on, but they're welcome to address the Planning Commission. Were there any cards? Okay. Seeing none, we'll close the public comment period. Move on to public hearing. And this will be for public hearing on item B of the agenda, which is IPD 53M11, which is Rexford Industrial at 3233 Mission Oaks LLC, and also for MND 2020B. Do we have a staff report for this item?
Yes, our assistant planner, or Paul McLaren will be giving, our associate planner, Paul McLaren will be giving our staff report tonight.
Proceed, thank you.
Good evening, Chair Espinoza, Vice Chair Vandermeulen, and other commissioners. Welcome to tonight's public hearing. So we are going to be getting a report on Rexford Industrial, IPD 53M11 and MND 2020-8. So this project is located at 323 Mission Oaks Boulevard, as shown on the map here. It is a 39-acre site approximately, and it is in the Flynn industrial area, and it is zoned M1 and is an industrial, in the general plan, it's an industrial use. The applicant is requesting to demolish an existing 52,500 square foot office building on the southern portion of the project site. This is known to many people in Camarillo as the Technicolor building. So that property there, or that building on that end of the site, would be demolished. And then in place of it would be constructed a new 117,000 square foot multi-tenant industrial building, referred to in the plans as Building A. And then on the back of the lot on the north side and attached to the existing industrial building that's there would be an addition of 55,766 square feet, which is Building B. So this is the existing site looking to the northwest from Mission Oaks Boulevard, and that's the Technicolor building you see in the background there. On October 16th, 1979, the Planning Commission approved IPD 53 for the construction of the approximately 569,000 square foot building at that site. Since then, there have been 10 approved modifications made to the site to include tenant improvements, trash enclosures, the reduction of the size of the building at times, and additions depending on the needs of the tenants that were occupying the site. This is the current request is for the 11th modification to this site. Here's the existing plan, and as you can see in the bottom right, that is the Technicolor building that will be demolished. It is currently set back from Mission Oaks Boulevard approximately 50 feet at the main, at that furthest point towards Mission Oaks Boulevard, out in this area here. And then the rest of the building is about 70 feet further back from there. The main industrial building that's on the site is all of this area here. And then here are some pictures. So again, this is on the left is the Technicolor building. And then these pictures on the right are taken from Calle Tecate at the northeast corner of the lot looking southwest. And this is where the Building B would be going. There is also this water tank on the site. This water tank was part of the original approval and was there in order to provide additional water for fire suppression because at the time the property was built, there just wasn't enough water pressure. So the proposed site plan has got the proposed building on the right here. This is the 117,000 square foot addition, Building A along Mission Oaks Boulevard. Behind this building is where there's going to be loading zones. And then all the way to the left on the north end of the property is where the proposed U-shaped building addition is going to be put on. So this is a rendering of where I originally took the picture looking to the northwest. This is what the building will look, or the property will look like, looking that same direction to the northwest. This doesn't have the street trees that will be required because they're trying to show the architecture. This is in the heritage zone, so this is sort of a modern take on the Spanish colonial style architecture. We've got tile roofs, we've got multiple colors, multiple treatments, and multiple materials on this facade. This building is divided into 6 tenant spaces. The end cap spaces are approximately 21,000 square feet, and the 4 interior spaces are about 19,000 square feet. They already have their office, which is on that rendering I was just showing, is what you see from the road, is their office spaces. And then the loading spaces are all in the back, and they have, each of them have 3 loading spaces, 2 exterior and 1 interior. And then as you can also see, this building is set back 116 feet from Mission Oaks Boulevard because they're providing a nice landscaping buffer that is going to support those trees that will go along there very well. And then it's putting 2 rows of parking so that the parking doesn't interfere with the loading in the back. It keeps it safe for the personal vehicles to stay out of the way of the trucks. And then there's a little bit more landscaping up against the building, and so the building is then set back 116 feet from Mission Oaks Boulevard. Building B, this is again where I showed the picture earlier. This is at Calle Tecate looking southwest. This is where the building is. The building on the left that's got the close together vertical striping on it is the existing building, and everything from that point to the right is the new building. So there will be a loading space on here. The architectural feature on the facade of this building is the entryway into the 2 office spaces that are on this side. The west side of the building also mirrors this side, so it looks just like this. The umbrellas and things like that are really for employees to go outside and be able to have some space to enjoy outdoors. This is the floor plan for this. Again, the 2 northern ends of these buildings are 2 tenant spaces. Each of those tenant spaces is approximately 15,000 square feet. And then the ones that are closer to the existing building are about 13,000 square foot spaces. And again, they have the offices on the left and the right, and each of these also has 2 loading zones. There will be public art on the facade of the building along Mission Oaks Boulevard. This is a preliminary conceptual idea, but there is a condition number 189 that says that this public art will come back to the Planning Commission when the final product is done, so that we can have the Planning Commission approve that public art. But it'll be central to the building along Mission Oaks Boulevard, so it'll be a nice view from Mission Oaks Boulevard to see this public art as you're driving down the street. Consistency analysis, this property, the way they've designed it, meets all of the setback requirements for the zone except for the front yard setback. As I mentioned earlier, the setback is 116 feet and 6 inches. The code says 20 feet to 50 feet, so a minimum of 20, a maximum of 50 feet. But the code also does say that the Planning Commission can approve as part of a planned development the additional increased setback. And so they're asking for that setback, again, to keep the passenger vehicles separate from the loading vehicles, and also to provide the landscaping buffer along Mission Oaks Boulevard. The parking, so they are basically designing this project where half of it will end up being manufacturing and half will end up being warehousing. So the parking for manufacturing is 1 to 500. And if the office space is less than 20% of the total space, then it is also counted at 1 to 500. So they will require 104 parking spaces for the building. The manufacturing is, they will require 628 spaces, and then the warehousing is at 1 to 1,000, so they'll require 267 spaces for that. So the total parking required is 895 spaces, but back in the 80s, IPD 53M4 was approved for a 10% reduction as allowed under the code. The director can give that 10% reduction. And so that was applied back with IPD 53M4. So the actual parking required is 805 spaces. They're providing 835 spaces, so there's a surplus of 30 spaces. The city did contract with Rincon Consultants to prepare an initial study for the project as required under the California Environmental Quality Act. The initial study determined that a mitigated negative declaration needed to be prepared, and that was prepared and made available for circulation and public review and comment on June 30th to July 20th of 2020. We had no comments that came in from the notice of intent and the hearing that we had for the notice of intent on this MND. Since that time, we have had one additional comment when we posted for this hearing, and that was related to traffic. It was more of a development comment, not environmental comment. The initial study in this project did identify 3 potentially significant effects on the environment. Air quality, just due to the construction activity that would be going on, the trucks and things like that. Biological resources for nesting birds that could possibly be on the site, either on the trees or on the walls of the building, and hazards and materials from potential soil contamination, because there is an old railroad spur on site, and demolishing a building that was built at the time may have asbestos and things like that. So to address these, mitigation measures were applied to the project. Air quality requires that they have that their construction equipment be EPA meet EPA standards, that they maintain their vehicles and keep logs of that maintenance, and that they never have any of their equipment idling for more than 5 minutes. The biological resources addresses the impact for the nesting birds, and so if they are going to start any work between February and August, they would have to hire a surveyor to do a tree nesting and site nesting study. And if it's determined that there's any sort of birds on site, then they're going to have to delay the project until August, when the birds have left the property. For the hazards, the soil contamination, any soil contamination that's found through soil samples will end up being excavated and removed to a facility to deal with those kind of contaminated soils. Prior to demolition of the building, they're going to have to get an environmental consultant in there to determine if there is asbestos or any other toxic materials in the building and remediate that prior to being allowed to demolish the building. And then, again, more about if the railroad spur, if there's any activity in the railroad spur area, they will have to do soil samples and make sure that there is no contamination. And if contamination is found, that material will have to be removed from site and then backfilled and the contaminated soil taken off-site to a appropriate facility. So approving the M&D, so the CEQA guidelines require that the M&D be adopted by a decision-making body if there is no substantial evidence in light of the whole record that the proposed project may have a significant adverse effect on the environment. This M&D did contain potentially significant impacts, but they will be mitigated to less than significant levels by the mitigation measures and the implementation of those, which all of these implementation measures and mitigation measures are also included as conditions of approval of the project. So based on this information, and in light of the whole record, there is no substantial evidence that the proposed project is going to have a significant effect on the environment. So the staff is recommending that you adopt a resolution approving the mitigated negative declaration 2020-8 and the recommended mitigation measures and the conditions of approval, and adopt a resolution approving IPD 5311 subject to the recommended conditions of approval.
Okay. Thank you very much. Now, do I have any questions from commissioners on staff's report at this time? Commissioner Talmadge.
I do. Good evening, everyone. As you went through the presentation, I appreciated very much the information, but I have a couple of questions. Is there any security on the overall yard that encompasses the building? Because all of the existing building and the two new additions, there's a lot of parking, but are there any security gates or security measures? Or are they just open all the time?
The entrance off of Calle Tecate has a gate so that they can control access through Calle Tecate where it's less visible, but the rest of the site is open. There are conditions of approval that we asked for the police department to prepare, and the police department was asking that they make sure that the landscaping stay open enough that they can visibly see onto the site. There will be a photometric study as required by the conditions of approval to make sure the site is well lit, but that the light doesn't spill over or cause light pollution. So it'll all be dark sky compliant lighting. And then they're also asking that they not put anything too close to the building to where people can hide behind it in the landscaping and things like that. So the security measures are mostly how they're going to design the property and the landscaping to make sure that the police can visibly see into the site.
Right, because I know a number of the tenants in the existing building serve the public, so you would have to have some sort of access, but I'm wondering about after hours. I know that the gate at Calle Tecate does have it's a chain with a padlock on it. I don't know if that's going to be open all the time, locked all the time, or what?
Yeah, it'll be open when necessary in order to be able to manage the truck traffic coming and going, but most of the time it's going to be shut off.
So it's not considered a primary entrance exit to the site?
It is not.
Okay, all right. You mentioned in your presentation a water tank that was needed for fire flow. Is that tank still in use?
It is still in use. It's there, it's in good condition, so it's been kept in use in order to be able to support the fire system if it became necessary.
Okay. Is it, electric pump driven?
Yes.
Is there any emergency power for that?
I don't know. I could toss that one to the applicant who is here when it comes time for. We're going to need you to come up to the mic in order to be able to make sure it goes on the record.
Yeah, so there's a pair of diesel pumps and generators that supply the fire system if it's activated.
So they provide the pressure to the system, but is there any emergency power to run those diesels should power go out?
Yeah, it's a diesel backup generator that powers them.
Okay, one diesel backs up the other one.
Right.
Okay, all right. What kind of industrial uses are we looking at in these buildings? I know that the existing building, they're pretty much small office and just like, I don't know what you'd call it, I guess warehouse space. But as you were talking, what what are we talking about in terms of what industrial uses are going to be in there? Is it, you mentioned manufacturing. What are we going to be manufacturing?
Right, so the developer is currently developing the site to end up being able to lease the spaces out to the tenants, whichever tenant may come along. So we have, a lot of different manufacturing companies that are coming in looking for warehousing space and manufacturing space. And so anything that would be allowed in the M1 zone, which is light industrial, would be allowed to go in that with a zoning approval into this space. So they would sign a lease with Rexford Industrial. The city, they would come to the city for their business license. We would verify that the manufacturing and warehousing that they're proposing to do is actually also going to meet the mix of 50% warehouse and 50% manufacturing so that it matches the parking requirements. And so there will be a zoning approval process that planning will do for each tenant that comes into the space.
So we may hear something else
Right.
in the future. Okay. Is there a wastewater treatment system for industrial waste
Thank you very much for your
on site?
comments.
I don't believe there is a wastewater, so again, it would become tenant-specific as to
Okay.
what the manufacturing requirements were. So, for instance, if a bakery wanted to go in there, there are specific wastewater treatment facilities that would have to be required by code to prevent the yeast and things like that from getting into the sewer system, which overtaxes the wastewater treatment facility. So it would be tenant-based on who actually goes into the spaces.
Right. Usually it's oils, greases, and various chemicals
Right.
used in
And
industrial
so as part of
processes.
the zoning approval, Public Works is also
Okay.
consulted, and they would determine whether or not the tenant specifically needs any sort of industrial wastewater permit.
Okay. Are there any requirements for filtering air for air emission control?
Again, if it's tenant-specific, then yes, there would be. So for instance, if an auto body went in there that was going to have a paint booth, they would be required to have the appropriate air emissions filter systems on the paint booth, or any other sort of industrial use like that.
Where is the former rail spur?
The former rail spur is actually between the Amazon distribution facility building and the new building.
Okay. Is that why one side of the building, it looks like there used to be some access points or doors, and now they are unusable?
Right, I mean, I actually saw in the pictures, I don't know that I can see
So
it in
it's
these
on the
pictures,
west
but,
side of the building?
yeah, it is on the west side of the building between
Right.
the two major buildings.
Okay. All right. With regard to the asbestos containment for, should there be any found in the course of demolition or whatnot, it says be hauled away to a dump. Where's the nearest approved dump for asbestos?
I don't know, but
Okay.
the proper remediation procedures are before they're actually allowed to do any demolition. They have to go in, they have to test the building. And the remediation then, if they found asbestos, the remediation would be to seal the entire building. And then people go in hazardous suits with respirators, and they take all of the material, they put it into bags, they have to double bag it, and then they remove it from site after it's already been like double and even triple bagged
Yeah,
before they're allowed to leave the sealed
Okay,
building.
so it is bagged. My concern is, don't want any open trucks on the open road with
Yeah.
asbestos materials.
Right, yeah, these remediation companies, they're all licensed and they know their business, and yeah, they make sure that everything is double and triple bagged before they take it to the appropriate facilities for dumping.
I didn't see that addressed in the MND. I know the cleaning of asbestos is, but the transport.
Right, it's all, the M&D talks about the ACM requirements, and this is all part of the Air Quality Management District's requirements. AQMD has the strict standards that they have to comply with in order to be able
Oh, I
to
understand
meet this
that.
mitigation measure.
Okay. Who, in fact, will be monitoring the mitigation measures, either during construction or afterwards?
They're going to have to hire a company that is going to have the MMRP as part of the MND, so the mitigation management plan, and they have to hire a company, an independent third-party company that will then be monitoring those. And then they also have to submit reports to me in order to verify that those are being properly followed.
So the developer is going to hire the consultant to do that mitigation monitoring and then prepare a report and send to you?
Correct.
Got it. Thank you. That's all my questions.
You're welcome.
Okay, a quick procedural question for the applicant that just came up. Are we okay doing that during this period, or does that need to be for public comment?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think maybe just to keep the record cleaner, maybe we direct all the questions to staff first, and if there are any questions for applicant, we'll save it until the applicant is up. This way, we won't have to identify in different places in the minutes who said what.
Right, thank you. Okay, further questions? Commissioner Murphy?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the nice presentation, Mr. McLaren. I found it very clear and easy to follow. The one question I have has to do with the setback requirement, the maximum setback requirement for Mission Oaks. You mentioned that we'll be considering allowing for the maximum setback to be exceeded. What is the purpose of the maximum setback?
The purpose, I really couldn't speak to what the city code's purpose was when the council originally approved it, other than it putting the building to where it's something that's visible from the street. In this case, it just doesn't make sense because of trying to facilitate using the entire site to the most efficient means possible, and then also for safety reasons, keeping the parking, the passenger cars from the loading areas, from those two intermingling with one another. So the reasoning behind why the code says 20 to 50 feet, it's anybody's guess. I just think that it might be a massing issue. That they want it to be human scale was maybe the original thought. In this particular case, this building also being as long and as large as it is, 40 feet in height, having that additional setback will also give a better human scale than the 50 feet would have. But I don't know if David maybe wants to step in.
Yeah, I can jump in on there a little bit. So the maximum is to prevent a very large parking field or loading zone in the front there and kind of push it back into the rear of the building. So we don't have this huge parking field in the front. And so like the yard is in the back, and all the semis and the loading and unloading will take place behind the building itself.
Okay, and we don't seem to have that here. We have a large landscaping requirement and a regular-looking parking lot in the front. It doesn't look like, in fact, that's probably the smallest portion of the parking lot that's in the front of those buildings between Mission Oaks and the building front, the proposed building front.
Yes, we think the proposed parking row there is acceptable.
Okay.
Yeah, it's only about 10% of the parking in the front of the property. And there will be, in the landscape there will either have a berm built up into the landscape or bushes that are about 3 feet in height in order to also, make it to where you're not just seeing cars, you're maybe seeing the hoods or the roofs of the cars rather than the whole car itself. So the landscaping will also help to buffer the car's visibility from the street.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Rizzo.
I had a question about the traffic. I know there was originally the traffic study done, and I just wondered if in that traffic study, it seemed like they wouldn't have anticipated something like an Amazon that's got cars coming in and out all the time. And then in this project, it seems like over doubling the square footage. Is there some sort of a circumstance where it would require for an updated traffic study, or what's the criteria on that?
If the traffic study would only really need to be updated if we determined that the uses that were going in there were higher intensity uses than is anticipated. With these industrial warehouses, per the traffic study, there's not expected to be a lot of trucks coming in and out of this project. And when the Amazon distribution facility was done, a traffic study was done there as well. And that traffic study stated that the Amazon facility was actually going to be less impactful than what had previously been at the Amazon facility. So what we have going on is the Amazon facility is actually less impactful than what was previously being used at the Amazon facility. And this facility is going to add a few additional trucks to the road, to the trips per day. And again, the traffic study is, the thresholds go on level of service of the intersections. Those level of service at each of the intersections are level A and B. I believe one intersection is level B. Per the traffic study, there is no expected change to the level of service at any of the intersections around the project.
Yeah, I guess I didn't realize they did a study when Amazon came in, so that's good to hear. But, and you talked about additional trucks, but what about with the increase of square footage, or do they expect more employees? That would be more, employees coming to and
Right.
from work?
Yeah, so it is anticipated based on square foot. I don't know if, yeah, we do have the person who did the study is here
Okay.
today, and he can speak to it. So maybe when we have the, I don't know.
Yeah, during the public hearing would be
Yeah,
fine.
we can have him come up and answer that question.
Okay.
So that he can give you some more detail on exactly what was studied.
Okay, and then, and I wasn't clear on the question on the water tower, that's going to stay there, right?
Yes, the water tank is staying.
Yeah.
It's a functional tank, it's still functional and still functions with the fire suppression system, so it's just a good backup to have.
Yeah, yeah, and it's not even noticeable, I didn't realize it was there until I went and looked at the,
Yeah, it's all the way at the
Project,
back of the
so
lot,
it's- yeah.
it's hardly noticeable at all.
great, thank you very much.
Okay, Commissioner, or Vice Chair Vandermeulen.
Thank you. I'm going to tag on to the parking or the traffic a little bit on this. But first, I'm going to start on a couple of conflicts I see in the guidelines that they have to do. Number 181 says no sales or displaying, which I think probably relates to signs or something on Mission Oaks. But then it says they can have wholesaling is permitted. What is Bulldog Liquidators? Is that retail? Is that wholesale? And with that, you have people that are there on the weekends. I mean, I think I went by on Sunday. So you have people coming into that parking lot on the weekends rather than just the people that work.
Right.
I was concerned with turning left out of that main driveway or turning left and turning right from the,
Turning left
the
across
other one,
eastbound
but-
traffic onto Mission Oaks Boulevard?
you've got curves coming in to right in front of that. It's kind of a little depression when you look at the street, so you don't have a good sight line going either direction, east or west, from those parking lots. So when I read that, it said that they can also enter and exit from the Tecate, on the north end of the property, I kind of was assuming that that gate then would be left open or go away, so that you would be able to continually go, even on the weekends, out that north exit or entrance and then over to Flynn Road and whichever way you wanted to go and get to signals and such.
Right.
So I still have a little concern, even though you've done level of service at the intersections. I'm concerned of any left turns and watching the traffic out onto Mission Oaks. And if you have more people working and you have continually people coming in to like a place to shop on the weekends, I just want to make sure that's all taken into consideration on that.
Yeah, again, I believe it is, and I think that, again, the gentleman here who did the traffic study would better be able to speak to that specifically. And I do believe that the gate along Calle Tecate is really going to be an operational issue that the developer could speak to. They may be able to keep that gate open during business hours and then close it at night in order to keep that down. I also know that it's also to try to control people using that particular stretch of the property as a throughway to Calle Tecate. So as a
I
shortcut.
can see that from the industrial, where the road curves right there, just keep
Right.
going straight, kind of.
Right,
Of course, now it just has a sign on it saying it's permanently closed, so.
right. So again, it could be an operational adjustment for the site, but that would, again, I believe the developer would want to address that.
Okay. Thank you, and I was glad to hear, I did have a question on the water towers, water tanks, is to make sure that they were separate totally from the Culligan operation that's there.
Yeah, that's not related at all.
Yeah. On Building B, along the back of it, along the side of the main industrial building there, at the back where Culligan comes out to the corner, they have like a little covered, I want to say covered patio for any other explanation. So it looks like that would be kind of, the side of the building would go over and extend to the end of that covered area that they have. So they would have like another wall there to the side of that area. Is that where it's coming out all the way?
So this is where Culligan is at currently, and this building is being added on from here down.
But in the back of the Culligan place.
So back here,
On the west side,
on the west side, back over here?
yeah,
Okay.
where they have a kind of a covered patio that it looks
Right.
like the side of Building B would come to that, but I
Yeah.
wasn't sure.
Yeah, the side of Building B, it's just going to be in line with this building facade here on the west side. So the west facade is just going to continue along to Building B. There will be that patio area, and all those areas are going to continue to exist. They're not actually touching any of the things in this area. And then this area is going to be built out like the other facade, in that it's going to have the entrances to the office spaces here. So it'll look just like the other side. It'll mirror the other side where it's got in the rendering, it shows the umbrellas and things like that. And again, that's sort of an outdoor patio space for the tenant or the people who work there to be able to go out and be able to enjoy some outdoor time on their
Yeah.
breaks and things.
Okay.
Did I answer your question?
Maybe. I can't quite picture on there as far as if the patio is included in the building part of it, and maybe the roof line comes out in that line, or if that covered patio area comes out to the same depth coming out as whatever's
Let's see.
outcropping from the building in the back.
So the west side is going to look almost exactly, well, it is basically going to look exactly like this. It's going to be a mirror image of this. So this is the existing building here, and then the facade is going to come out. And so the patio areas I believe you're talking about are over here, but on the west side.
It almost looks like it's inset from the corner of the building, in the back, on the west side.
Okay. Let's see if I can look at a existing site plan. So this is the existing site plan, and this is where the Culligan area is on this corner. And these right now are loading docks, and then there's loading docks here as well. So this is the only patio area that's really there.
So maybe that's an empty loading dock area that I'm looking at on the end of it, on the north end of.
Yeah, and so there
northeast end.
are some things along here that are going to end up having to go away because the building will be there.
Right. Okay. Now I think it makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And let me see here. Water tanks. One of the directions said something about utility lines to the lot, which is probably just one of our generic directions that we give that they have to do. So are there currently enough utility lines on the lot to be branched out from, or are they going to have to bring more utility lines, water lines, electric lines in for Building B and where Building A is?
There's probably is going to have to be some larger lines brought in, but they're all underground. But I think that the developer, again, is going to be able to answer that question
Okay.
a little bit better than I will.
Okay. I think that's currently all I have to ask. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chair. All right, a couple of things I wanted to ask related to the mitigated negative declaration. Very thorough and exhaustive report. very well done, I thought. There was a lot of detail regarding the items that were, flagged for bringing below the level of significance. Primarily, there was an interesting, history with the soil contamination, and that dates back almost 20 years, it sounds like. So I'm assuming that in this instance, that this future development here will be following those same types of measures that were taking place, like when they put in a loading dock at some point. I think I've seen that there's like various work plans. There's been various soil studies. They've outlined 5 specific areas where they had core samples and did boring where they found contamination. So in that, I would have liked to have seen, like on a map like this is existing site plan, as to where those 5 specific areas were and if they're going to be impacted by the construction and by the underground excavation for utilities or whatnot. But is it pretty certain that it's going to be impacted by the construction and that they will have to be following those measures in this instance?
No, so there's no guarantees that any of these things are going to actually be impacted. Essentially, as the construction progresses, they're going to end up having to do the soils and sampling at that time, and then based on, so that's part of the mitigation monitoring reports, and the company that will be out there doing this is they'll take the samples, they'll do the tests that they need to do, determine if there's contamination, and then they'll have to remediate by removing any contaminated soil and bringing backfill in and that sort of thing. So it's as they go, and it's really only going to be impacted on areas where contamination is found is where they would do the mitigation and remediation.
Okay, so they'll do one of
If
two
it's
things.
undisturbed, we're not going to disturb it.
Okay, great. And as far as, the materials, this, like I say, I think this is, to me, is the primary thing of concern for me in terms of, just the making sure that that it's done right, that this aspect is really covered well and is done right and it's safe for future development and with this project. So I'm hoping that that will be the case here. But they did have a work plan or agreement with the Department of Toxicology and Substance Control. Has staff seen these kinds of work plans or agreements, or is that something that has not come into view?
It's part of, so as we progress through the project, we will be going through the conditions of approval. And as each stage of the project progresses, we do a compliance. Basically, we do compliance monitoring. Compliance monitoring is where it'll say in the conditions of approval, prior to grading permit, you must do this. When we get ready to do that, we have to make sure we have all of the evidence in our files and in our system that shows that they have complied with that particular measure. And that includes any agreements or anything like that. They have to provide us with that information, and then it goes into the report. And then they don't get their grading permit until Public Works has verified that all of those compliance issues have been met. And then, again, when it comes time for them to actually begin the building permit, there's compliance issues that, or code conditions of approval that will say prior to a zone clearance, which is one of the conditions, that they get a zone clearance prior to building permits. That is sort of a stop check for the city to go ahead and verify that they have already done everything up to that point per the zoning, per the conditions of approval to be allowed to get a building permit. And then during construction, there will be ongoing mitigation, and that's where the MMRP is going to come in, that we will have that third party submitting reports to us in order to verify that the monitoring is going on and what the results of those monitorings are. And then finally, before final compliance or final sign-off and occupancy, there's a whole other set of conditions of approval that will have to be verified, that then they'll have to have satisfied the city staff that those things have also been done before they get certificates of occupancy for the buildings.
Okay. And the last thing, I didn't notice that they did talk about those 2 entities that they were working with, which is a state entity, the Department of Toxic Substance Control, and then the Los Angeles Regional Water Quality.
Air Quality Board?
Yeah, and so it made no mention of any like county or local agencies that they were working with in the past or even, or would be working with now. Is that?
Yeah, so these are state organizations and county organizations that are responsible on the county level for monitoring air quality and monitoring, the mitigation measures. So they're not private companies, they're county and state agencies that they're dealing with.
Right, okay, yeah, because I didn't know whether in the past, like when they did the dock and they had to go through this whole report and working plan and so forth, if they, at that time, they worked with county environmental health or if it was just state agencies they were working through to make the corrective measures and so forth.
Yeah, it's state agencies.
Okay. All right, that's all I have for now, so with that, we will open up the public comment on this agenda item. Do we have any cards, speaker cards? Okay, seeing none. We did receive one comment that was transmitted to all commissioners, and that will be entered for the record. Would the applicant like to address the commission at this time?
Good evening. RJ Reeves with Rexford Industrial. First off, just want to thank Paul, Tolly, and the rest of the staff for all their work the past 3 years to get us to this point. It's been quite the process, but very glad to be here and appreciate your help. Commissioners, appreciate your time and consideration and review of this. Just to answer some of the questions that have been brought up. So the gates in the back of their property. So over the 10 years that we've operated and owned this site, I think we've found that people do use that as a cut through. And it's a safety issue, just conflicting with additional traffic on site that doesn't need to be there. But definitely always open to review that, and if it seems that we can safely use that as another egress and ingress point, definitely we'll do that. To touch on the utilities, so as part of the previous development, we were able to pre-plan a lot of the utilities for the back building. So a lot of that has already been taken care of. On the front building, we'll reuse as many as we can, but there will be some additional tie-ins for that. And then just to touch on the asbestos, so that's overseen by the Air Quality Management District. And as we're doing the asbestos abatement, as it gets ready to leave the site, there's manifests that are signed first by the generator, so the site owner, next is signed by the transporter, and then finally signed by the receiver of the final site. So those are like the paperwork that go to the AQMB that show kind of the life of that material. So that is it, unless there's any other questions.
I have a question. First off, I missed your name, I'm sorry.
RJ Reeves.
RJ Reed?
Reeves, R-I-E-V-E-S.
Okay. Thank you. One question. While you have the work going on, the demolition of, the one building and then the construction of the new buildings, what happens to the existing tenants while you're doing demolition and starting work when there may be fugitive asbestos or things like that? Are you going to be able to confine it to that space, or are they going to have to move out of their space while the work takes place?
So all the asbestos that would be disturbed is contained to the empty building that will be vacant, the separate front building. But as part of that asbestos abatement procedure, everything's under negative pressure and there's exterior containment, so it's all contained in the workspace.
Okay. Somewhat related, during construction, there's, of course, a number of existing tenants in the existing building. How do you see traffic moving in and out of the site with construction going on and occupancy of the building? Do you see that as an issue?
It'll definitely take a lot of work and coordination with ourselves, our tenants, and the general contractor, but definitely we'll come up with a phased plan to make sure that access is always kept to the existing tenants and ample parking away from the construction.
Okay, that's all I have.
Vice Chair Vandermeulen.
If, did I read somewhere on there that you were going to do the construction stuff on Building A before you did Building B, rather than try to do them both at once, or is that something I'm just imagining?
That was a consideration in the past, but they will go very similar timelines. I think the demolition for Building A in the front may cause that to lag a little bit from Building B in the back. But if we were able to get permits for both at the same time, we'd start and construct them at the same time.
Okay. What is the occupancy level now for the larger industrial building that's staying?
I believe we're 100% occupied there.
Okay. I only saw like, I don't know, 3 names of companies or something as I drove by, so I don't know how large they are, other than Culligan and Bulldog and something else, so.
Yeah, there's
Bulldog.
a makeup company, and then there's a few of them that just have one storefront, but on the inside have taken much.
Several spaces. Thank you. I think that's all I have.
Commissioner Murphy.
Yeah, a couple questions. On that, the gate, closing or keeping it open, is that developer's call, or is that city, or is that a combination?
I'm not sure what the city's standpoint on it is, but from a just operations perspective of the site, our property management team has found that it's better to be closed, just to prevent people speeding through and trying to use it as a cut-through.
Right, so it seems like the cut-through would occur mainly on the weekdays when there's quite a few more vehicles using the area. So along the lines of the concerns that Vice Chair Vandermeulen brought up for the weekends, could it be considered to leave the gate open during regular business hours for Saturday? And is Bulldog open on Sundays?
I think it was Sunday that I was there, but
Yeah.
the one thing, though, on that was that on Sunday, turning out onto Mission Oaks, I didn't have any problem, and that was the only thing that was open. So hopefully, unless they get more traffic or you get more companies that have something to do with bringing people in, hopefully on the weekend, it wouldn't be too bad of a problem.
Okay, so it is less on the weekends anyways. All right.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I was more concerned with weekdays and school traffic going back and forth on Mission Oaks and Amazon trucks going back and forth on Mission Oaks, and, that there might be more of a problem for traffic like all day long rather than just early morning and afternoon traffic to be considered.
Right, okay, thank you. Well, the gates will be left open to Tecate during regular business hours during the weekdays, is that correct?
I don't think that's our current plan now. I think it's more if there's a use that comes in that necessitates that, and we're still able to get traffic to safely flow through the site with that additional egress point. I think probably how it's locked right now is just with a city or fire department lock on. So if they did need to come in that way, they have the key. But
Oh, okay, so ingress, egress to the general public will not be permitted in general, or if it is, when will it be?
I don't think we're ready to set any kind of parameters now. It really would depend on kind of the evolution of the site and the tenant mix that comes in.
Got it.
I was going to say, it would certainly be more convenient for the back part of that building, the north part of that building, to be able to go out the other gate at nighttime or in the afternoon and stuff, rather than everybody heading out to Mission Oaks. But something to think about if it can work it out.
Yeah, definitely. We have very involved property management staff that are on the site very frequently, that as we get feedback from tenants and what they see, just kind of with their own eyes, can kind of make those decisions, and always open the conversations with the city as we go along.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I'd like that to be taken into consideration. It's that, it's one thing to have a traffic study and develop level of service, but level of service doesn't address that left turn movement onto eastbound Mission Oaks that is a difficult turn, a left turn to make. It doesn't stack cars up, but I don't know what the speed limit on Mission Oaks is, but vehicles are traveling fairly quickly on that. So any kind of relief that you would give to those who would be taking that left, I would rather, exit onto Ducati during busy hours. So
Commissioner Murphy, we do actually have the gentleman who prepared the
Yes.
traffic study here. If he could maybe come up to the microphone and address that.
Okay. Right now? Okay.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Daryl Nelson with Associated Transportation Engineers. The question that you're asking is a question that we really can't address at this point. The left turn movement that you're talking about, the way it should be handled is there's a center turn lane on Mission Oaks. That's where if you're making a left turn coming out, that's there for a reason, to give refuge for people who want to continue east on Mission Oak. So as the westbound traffic on Mission Oak is going towards Amazon, you'd look for a gap. You get a gap, you go into that refuge lane, wait, and you can continue, if you go out there and drive it, you can see where it merges you into the through traffic, and that's why it's there. And unless I have not seen any collision data, because that driveway's been there for years. So if there's some collision data that we could review to see if there's a issue, then we could do some more and answer that type of a question that you're thinking about, what will happen in the future.
Yeah.
But again, that driveway's been there for years. Haven't seen, Jason, have you seen any collision data? So we would say that the driveway's fine.
My concern when I was turning was that I was turning left, and I did end up turning into the middle either way lane. However, because the road curves back and away, there's not a clear viewpoint back to the signal, or back, a block away. So somebody can be coming really fast, and you're not going to see them as you're maybe starting to turn. So to me, there wasn't a big enough line of sight to feel that I could just safely pull out into it. So,
Again, I understand your question, and without having more data to say there's some type of a sightline problem, I can't particularly answer that question right now. I know I've driven to the site, come out of that driveway, and had no problem.
okay.
I think there was a question about the trip generation earlier, and what traffic is included.
Oh,
The trip generation rates include all trips, all traffic, whether it's trucks, employee, miscellaneous deliveries, it's all the traffic. It's not just passenger cars.
But increasing the square foot of the building didn't alter the
didn't-
study then?
It didn't increase the traffic above what's already out there when you look at the usage change. So all the trips are included, passenger car, delivery, and miscellaneous mail delivery
Okay,
are in there.
thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and close the public comment on this agenda item and move on to commissioner discussion. The commissioners want to?
Yes, I have some comments. First off, the existing situation on the site with the, quote, Technicolor building, unquote, they haven't been there for a long time, but I've always enjoyed driving on Mission Oaks Boulevard and not seeing a great big stark warehouse sitting right on the road. I thought it was very nice to have what seemed to be a one-story building with a nice tile roof and all that, and it really hid the warehouse from behind. And this particular project demolishes that building, but we see in its place, it's on the lower left there, I think a very attractive building that also, it could be an eyesore, it could be just a big blank concrete wall, and it's not, and I think a lot of effort was put into give some dimension to the building, some ins and outs, ups and downs, good fenestration for light coming into the building, et cetera. So I think that's a very good answer. And then for the new part of the building on the back, the quote Building B, it models very much the architecture of the existing building, which had given me some concern, and I'm glad to see that it does replicate what we see in the existing building. I did walk through some of the existing building. There's a couple of businesses there, and it's amazing what went into that building to begin with. It's a huge building with an awful lot of mechanical equipment in there, pipes and all sorts of things. And I guess the best wishes to whoever, I hope the people that are there stay, and whoever comes in can benefit from it. But overall, I think this project has come a long way in, I think, staying a part of that neighborhood, but not being an obtrusive industrial building. I think it's done very smartly. I think it's done with a lot of care. And I feel very, very good about this particular project. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Yeah, it's good to see a lot more use on that site. It will be an improvement aesthetics-wise. The only comment that I have has to do with that gate. I would like for some further consideration to be made by the applicant and perhaps the city. It's not a deal breaker for me. As far as I'm concerned, the city has done, and the applicant have done their due diligence in the process with a sufficient traffic analysis and support for what is currently planned. And I think it would be nice to have that gate open perhaps during peak hours and so forth. So encouraging a little bit more thought along those lines. But as I said, that's not a deal breaker for me, and I can certainly support the project.
Commissioner Edsel.
Yeah, I thought it was a nicely done project, and they, paid a lot of attention to our heritage zone and complied with all the city requirements and made it where it's a large project, but not intrusive, and it still has that nice look on Mission Oaks Boulevard. And coming in here, my concern was the traffic issue, and I've been satisfied with that. I didn't realize the study included the Amazon thing, and I thought that would make a difference, but there was a study that included with that, so I'm satisfied that was looked into and thought for, and I'm satisfied with the opinions of the experts on that, and I support the project as well.
Just a second, I might have got ahead of myself. Do you want to wait till after the rest of the commissioners' comments for the architectural review report?
I kind of weaved it into my comments. But
I figure you covered most of it,
yeah,
but I just wanted to officially get that out of the way.
Ahead of time, and our purpose was to examine just the architectural part, to see, to talk about the design and whether or not they complied with the heritage zone and other requirements of the city of Camarillo. And in that committee meeting, we approved the architectural. We thought it was well done, especially along the long, such long buildings that they took great care to use different materials and articulation to not give it that boring mass look. It's a really nice building, and there was a lot of thought into it, and we approved it at that architectural committee meeting.
Thank you. Vice Chair Vandermeul.
Thank you. I'm kind of glad to see the smaller industrial areas coming in. I don't think that we have enough in the city, so it's nice to add those to the area. When I worked for Ventura County, in the assessor's office, there were so many areas in Ventura that had either industrial condos or, the smaller industrial buildings. And things like, I just saw an article in the paper, somebody finally opened up what do they call it? A beginning kitchen thing, to where people can go in and rent the kitchen space for a few hours and try out their recipes or, eventually build up to a restaurant. And I don't feel that we've had enough. We've had a couple startup, we've had a few come to our attention to divide an industrial building into, I think one of them was supposed to go into industrial condos with smaller spaces. And I think there's a need for that, and I think this is done very well the way it's done. The front building, Building A, really has an appearance more of an office building. It doesn't stick out as an industrial building. And I just think it's a good addition to bringing in some more business into Camarillo. So, thank you.
Thank you. Well, I definitely, feel this project has the ability to really enhance the whole site by a great deal with the new construction in the front and the rear, and with the architectural enhancements that are going to be a part of it. All other aspects, I think, are in place in terms of the things that needed to be covered with the parking, with the building heights, with the setbacks. Everything looks good as far as that's concerned. So my only concern that I have, and still just want to make sure I'm clear about this, because I have a safety orientation, so I just really want to make sure that that aspect of it, in terms of the soil, how it's dealt with, because the products that were listed in the mitigating negative declaration are no joke. I mean, they're nothing to be ignoring. So I just want to make sure that we hold them, to the standards that they really need to be held, and that aspect is really focused on with the attention it needs. Other than that, I think it's going to be a great enhancement to the area. And with that, we'll go ahead and call for reading of resolutions.
Yeah, so we have two resolutions. We'll take them one at a time. So first, we'll take the mitigated negative declaration. So resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Camarillo approving and adopting mitigated negative declaration 2020-8 for IPD 53M 11.
Move to waive further reading and vote to adopt.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the mitigated negative declaration. All vote. That passed unanimously.
Okay, so the second resolution tonight is Resolution PC 2022-02, a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Camarillo approving a request by Rexford Industrial, located at 3233 Mission Oaks, LLC, for a modification to IPD-53 to demolish an existing building and construct a new standalone building and in a new addition to an existing industrial building in the M1 zone of the Flynn industrial area, further described and set forth as IPD 53M11.
I'll make a motion to waive further reading and vote for adoption.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Edsel and seconded by Vice Chair Vandermeulen. Any discussion? We vote on that. That passes unanimously. And we move on to Director's Report.
So I do not have a director's report for tonight.
Okay, no Director's Report. We can move on to any Commissioners' final comments here.
Not tonight.
No?
We're good? Okay, with that, I'll declare the meeting adjourned.